Hey everyone, it's Kamara Toffolo, and this is Office Hours Live, and we are streaming on YouTube and LinkedIn Live for the very first time tonight. I'm super excited. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Kamara again. I am a resume writer, LinkedIn consultant, and job search strategist who helps working professionals dare to do work differently and land great fitting gigs. So that's all about me. More about my exciting and very knowledgeable guest tonight, Dr. Jon Tam. And he is a career change coach and expert. So I'm really, really excited because I work with a lot of people in terms of strategizing their career change, but identifying that career change and working through all of the homework to get there. That's not what I'm an expert in, but that's what Jon is an expert in. So he helps millennial professionals get unstuck from their unfulfilling jobs and careers, and really leverages his background in research and personality science to figure out what career track is best for you. So I'm really, really excited to have Jon, and I'm going to bring him into, before I bring him in, I should tell you how I know him. We connected first on Twitter, love Twitter, but we're also part of YouTube for Bosses, and Jon has an amazing YouTube channel, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So without further ado, here's Dr. Jon Tam. Hello, Jon.
Hey,
welcome
Kamara.
to Office Hours.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. I'm actually sharing our stuff right now on my social media posts.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that. So is there anything that important that I missed in the introduction when introducing you?
Nah, it's all good. Let's get into the meat of the subject.
The meat of the subject. All right. Career change. So obviously on a lot of people's minds right now.
Yes.
Especially with everything that's going on with the pandemic. When would you say is a good time? Like when do we know that the stars are aligning as okay to make a career change?
Well, I think when you're talking about, there's several layers to that question already. When is it okay to make a career change? Well, do you have a plan for it, right? The other thing is, when your stars are aligning, it's like, how are you in your career right now? Are you enjoying what you're doing? Or are you feeling like it's no longer the right fit for you? And I think a lot of times that gut feeling would tell you whether you're happy or not. And if you're not, it's time to go back to the drawing board and see what's the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When do you think, I'm not sure if I know when my gut feeling is really kind of sending alarm signals. Like when do we know that something's not right?
Right. So whenever you say something's not right, you're denoting that you are on a path of sorts, right? You're going somewhere, there's a destination. And that's really a lot of the problems that a lot of the clients I work with face. And it's the fact that, hey, I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm burning myself to the ground. I love making money, but I'm burning myself to the ground. I don't have the mental space to be with my kids. And that's a lot of times the problem that we see. And so it's like, if you imagine your career as in you're driving to a destination, but you don't really have, you're on a road trip, but you have no destination, right? The first thing you need to do is pull aside and figure out where you want to go. And if you don't know where you want to go, then pretty much you won't even know whether you're on the right path or not, because you don't have a destination.
That's such a great point, because in my work, which is predominantly focused on resumes and LinkedIn, I see that a lot. People not having taken that time to pull over, as you say, to identify what that destination is. And that's so, so key. So what would you say is really the first major step we need to take in terms of identifying that destination?
Well, to pull a play from Gary Vee's book, but he's totally right. It's self-awareness is critical. And when we're talking about self-awareness, there's several layers to it. Number one, intellectually in the knowledge space, are you going where you want to be? Is your financial planning on point? Are you in a place where you think it's like, oh, this is a good place to grow my career because there's growth opportunities, right? And a lot of times logically we can work that out, but I think emotionally is the harder part for a lot of people, especially guys, I think. And the reason for that is, you got to dig deep. And so it's like, what are you like at the subconscious level? Is your emotion telling you what you want? Like, there's a job that you can start perhaps 10 years ago that used to, really inspire you and light a fire under you, and you want to go to work every day and you're super motivated. But over time, this is what we call flow psychology. Over time, what used to put you in a state of flow, which is that optimal state of challenge, along with the skills that you have, it's optimally challenging. And what happens over time is that you get better and things get easier. And what happens is you start to get bored. It's like if you play basketball with your kid all the time, you're going to destroy them all the time. It's not even a competition. But and so that's one reason why a lot of times people feel like, oh wait, this is getting boring. I want something new. And then another thing that people typically struggle with is they feel anxious, right? They perhaps pivoted their job to an extent that they're starting to feel like, wait, how am I here? What's going on? And a lot of that is because when you start at the entry levels, a lot of what you do is you apply a lot of hard skills. You need to do the nuts and bolts of the business. Right. You're a cog in the machine, for lack of better terms. But as you climb the ranks, you need to develop more soft skills. You need to start managing people. And the nature of what you do fundamentally changes, and you hardly realize it. Like when you're in that corporate structure and you see that the only role to advancement is to deal with people, but that also means that what you do fundamentally changes. You also find yourself in a place that may not be in a place where you want to play. So management is a very good example. A lot of people, they're experts at what they do. They're great at what they do. But once they get promoted to managing people and they're like, wait a second, half my day I'm doing stuff I hate, right? I just want like, just put me in my room and let me code or let me design this thing. I don't want to like tell XYZ how to do their job. Like, this is super annoying for me. And so it gets, either doing something that they don't want to do, or it makes them anxious, and that puts them in off flow. So that's why, when we're talking about satisfaction and, knowing that self-awareness and knowing who you are as an individual and what you want to do, that is so key, because you want to stay in that optimal level of skills and challenge. Right. And, there's also the third part, which is there's toxic people around you, but that's another problem, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's a whole different session, dealing with toxic people.
Yep.
Samaya just popped into the chat and she really liked your analogy around flow. So that's awesome. Thanks, Samaya, for checking in on that. The whole management thing, that's not the topic that I've been talking about on office hours with a couple different experts in leadership. What are your thoughts around, because you talk a lot about soft skills. Yep. So what are your thoughts around, let's say you do want to be in management and you don't see it as something that is misaligned with what you really want to do. What would you recommend to someone to get prepared for that management role?
So soft skills is generally, the corporate structure typically goes in the manner of, at the entry level, you do a lot of hard skills. The higher you go, the more soft skills you need. And the reason for that is because trust is a major part of the working place, right? Especially when it comes to leadership. Can I trust on this person, that they have my back? And can I communicate with this person? And so soft skills is kind of used, like it's thrown around a lot. And it's like, at the end of the day, soft skills is so soft and fluffy, you don't really know what it is. But if you break it down, it's really like people skills and self-management skills. And I remember you recently tweeted something about time management, right?
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah. And time management is part of self-management. And it's kind of a fluffy thing, right? And that's why sometimes it's like, dude, like, of course we know how to manage our time. But I think at the end of the day, the higher you go, the more soft skills you need. And that goes down to your personality, right? And I think personality is what we call, his name is something Christakis, and he's a sociologist from Yale.
Okay.
And one of the things that he says is, it's called what we're pre-wired to be like. So our temperament, our personality. And so we have different facets of our personality. And one of them is, for example, agreeableness. Trait agreeableness is the measurement of, how much you prioritize, group harmony versus your own agenda, for example, right? And people who are highly agreeable would tend to struggle in leadership positions, because the reason is, if you are a leader, people are looking to you for direction, but you love to defer and you love to ask everyone for their opinion. And it's a lot of, you invite them for their opinion, but at the end of the day, but after you invite them, you're like, I want to validate them and I want to whatever. But if the whole team has different directions, you got to call the shot, right? And a lot of times, highly agreeable people in leadership roles struggle with setting boundaries, struggle with saying no, struggle with just getting to the hard conversation that needs to be done sometimes, and that could drain a lot of people. Right. And so, that's just one facet of the personality of the big 5 personality traits, which is the gold standard for psychology. And so when you look at your leadership role and the soft skills that you have, how do you optimize it to be the best leader possible? Right. And so every job role and job function has its own ideal personality profile that you should have. And if you don't have that perfect personality profile, it's not a problem. You use your soft skills to stretch yourself. So if you are introverted, you're naturally introverted, and some job requires, and leadership roles generally require you to be extroverted, a little more extroverted at least. Then you need to tap into that extrovert battery. Even though you prefer to be an introvert, you need to tap into that extrovert battery and sometimes flip on that machine. Bill Gates is a super introverted individual.
Super introverted,
and he developed the soft skills to be somewhat, to be able to deal with people. So, and introverts love people. They just can't handle too much of it.
Right.
So there's your temperament and your personal inclinations, but at the end of the day, soft skills is about tapping into it so that you are more efficient in becoming a people's person, or you're more efficient at saying no, because you have set scripts in your brain like, no, I got to say no now. I got to draw this boundary or else. These are the soft skills that we're talking about.
I love that you said use your soft skills to stretch yourself, because in my opinion, soft skills, and I think you agree based on what you've been saying, soft skills are skills you can develop, skills you can acquire, skills that you can hone really and strengthen. So do you agree with that? Like, you can really work at your soft skills. I mean, Bill Gates was a great example.
Yeah. I mean, soft skills is what I would say is pre-wiring, but the post-wiring, post-development, that's up to you. Now, mind you, there's also a situation where sometimes if the job if Bill Gates is put in a situation where he has to be extroverted all the time, I mean, that will drive him to the ground.
Sure.
Right? And I think that, and so at the end of the day, it's about you adjusting to the job, but also adjusting the job characteristics to you.
Adjusting the job characteristics to you. So, and how would we go about doing that? That's really intriguing me.
Right. I think there's several things. You need to be number one, you need to be cognizant, like have that self-awareness part down first.
Yeah,
the next part is, okay, once it gets to the performance reviews and you're talking to your boss. And now, mind you, if you're at an entry level, like if you're in your 20s and you really just started the job, your boss will probably just say, oh, cool, thanks for just do your job. I can't really adjust your job to you, right? Right. It's just that's just how the machine works, right? But once you get a little higher, you get to pick and choose. You get to hire people and you get to, put people around yourself so that you're in a better position to function. That's what you want to do, right? It's about structuring your job so that it is adjusted to you. And you can do that through performance reviews. You can do that through hiring. You can do that by changing the processes at work. So for me, like what I like doing, being an entrepreneur and running my own business, one of the things I hate doing is I hate going on to LinkedIn and putting in my own posts. I don't like it. So what do I do? right? And then so you go,
Relate.
what do some people do? They go on to go get Hootsuite, or they go get Later, or get some other app to do it. And then
Yeah.
if you don't like setting that up, then hire a VA to do it, right?
Yeah.
So for us, that's an example. But for other people, there are other things that you can do to change the nature of your job and adjust it to you so that you are more in a state of flow and less in a state of non-flow.
That makes so much sense. So I like how you mentioned, like, if you're a 20-year-old just starting out, maybe you can't adjust your job to you. So like the big topic of tonight is like the different stages of career change, rather, at different ages, because you did like a whole series on your YouTube channel about 20s, 30s, 40s. And I thought that was just so interesting. So let's start with the 20s.
Yep, sure.
What, like, how would we go about changing our careers when we're in our 20s? I guess that'd be a really good time. Maybe not.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the videos I made in my YouTube channel, is like job hopping in your 20s is actually okay. And the data and the research shows that it's really okay, because when we break it, like, I approach things like a sociologist, because that is my training, right? And one of the things that you look at in sociology is life stage research. Each life stage, everyone has different motivations. They have different goals. They have different values, right? So when you're in your 20s, it may be like, I'm trying to figure out my way in the workplace. I'm trying to figure out my next step. I'm trying to find my career direction. And I'm trying to find what I like to do at work. I'm meeting new people. There are so many things that's going on. And some people, are in the super, like, very much into the hustle life. Some people are like, I can't wait to, find something that I actually love because I hate my job here. So they job hop, right? And during this time, they acquire a lot of skills, they build a network and so on. And so when you're in your 20s, thinking about a career is not really the right way to think about it. You got to think about, what do I like to do? Am I learning more about myself? Am I picking up new skills? And this is like the one advice I would give everyone, no matter what age you are. And this is going to be increasingly so in the future, is that focus on your skills and not on the titles. Like, the skills are changing so quickly nowadays. And if you're in your 20s, you're in an awesome position to see the rise. I mean, for us, we saw the rise of the internet at the .com boom.
Yep.
But other people nowadays, what they're going to see is what? The rise of AI and automation. They're going to see robotics. They're going to see 5G. They're going to see quantum computers. They're going to see biotech, right? The whole race against COVID right now is based on biotech. And people don't really know it. They don't really know what's going on. And so you are on such amazing frontiers right now in your 20s that figure out what skill you want to do and just double down on it. If you looked at if you pay any attention to the development of tech and so on, what you're going to realize is that in the future, soft skills are going to increase in value, right? And it's showing on Indeed and all those other hiring platforms.
Yep.
And at the same time, the hard skills are moving away from rote labor and repetitive work to everything that's like creative and design based. And you need that human side to it, just humanizing these amazing tools that are coming to play. And this is, this advice is, useful for 20s to 40s. I mean, actually to all ages.
For sure.
But if you're in your 20s, really find that one skill that you love and double down on that like a mother. And, and by the time you're in your 30s, like, if you spend 10 years clocking, like, good 10 years on finding that skill and honing down that skill, you're going to be in a pretty good position and to have that key skill to market yourself. And as a resume writer, I'm sure it's all about aligning that skill you have to the goal you have, the target job you're going for.
100%. And I love what you say, double down on it. That's really what I would like to see more of. Like, really, like, if it's what you like to do, please keep doing more of it.
Yeah.
Like, do more. Don't move away from doing what you love. I mean, if you figured it out, you figured it out, and just keep at it and accumulate great accomplishments along the way. That's awesome advice. I love that. And it is such an exciting time for the younger generation in terms of the emerging tech that's coming out. Like, I had a client who did AI for aerospace, like rockets. Like, I was just like, wow, it was super foreign to me. But I learned a lot. So, but yeah, anyway, it's a really exciting time. Hytham, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Oh, It's a long comment, so we're being blocked. But I'm a business development director. I manage sales managers, negotiate large contracts. After I lost my job because of COVID, I started looking to acquire new hard skills like data analytics and maybe coding. I think it's important to learn these new skills as I see a lot of demand in the future. I want to know your point of view. I'm 45 with a PhD and MBA in business. Wow, very educated.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to find that to be increasingly the case in the future because we have a huge balloon in the education sector in terms of the higher ed for PhDs. And I myself have a PhD, and then I decided to move to industry. Sorry, I missed your name on there, but
sorry, Hytham or Ben?
Hytham. I'll just call you Ben. All right. So like Ben, likewise, same experience. Now, I would say that making a pivot towards data analytics at 45 is totally fine. I think there's increasingly a high demand for this type of skills, and obviously education is not a problem for you, and learning is not a problem for you. And I think nowadays, when we look at degrees, that seems to be the case. Like I know some people are saying like, oh, degrees don't matter throughout the degree, and I know I literally just said titles don't matter, but there's another school of thought like Mark Cuban who came out and said like, your degree matters because it shows that you are able to hustle and grind and learn, and you know how to learn. And so in terms of the pivot towards data analytics during COVID times, I think COVID times is probably the best opportunity afforded to anybody since 2008 to make a career pivot. Because nowadays, from the hiring perspective, right? When you're looking at hiring, anytime you look at the resume for 2008, it's like, oh, okay, recession hit, like the Great Recession hit. Yeah. Nowadays, if you look at 2020, it's like, okay, well, COVID hit, right? Yeah. So that, like, one of the biggest hurdles that people struggle with, and it's not a struggle if you know how to explain it away, but most people don't. And one of the biggest hurdles that they struggle with is explaining job gaps, right? Or terminations and so on. And in your case, I mean, if you're deciding to do a pivot during COVID, this automatically gives you a perfect excuse for the next year or so. Right? Yep. Yeah. And so I think in this case, it's like there's no better time to do a pivot because what's the worst that could happen really right now? Right?
That's a really good point. And from my point of view, resume point of view, like explaining away the job gap, this time couldn't be easier to do such a thing. It's so easy because it's like, hello, COVID, everyone's affected. But and I like your take on that, and that makes perfect sense to me. Whether you are for necessity purposes, you're forced to make a change, or it just sparks something in you, some new self-awareness, as we've been talking about, to make that change, that pivot. You're right. Now is a great time. And I think Ben is or Hytham, sorry if we're using the wrong name. I think he's very well positioned. I think he's going to be in very high demand. I've seen a lot of people who are late career going into data analytics and doing very well. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I see that as well. And I see also, like, even within industries like IT, right? IT is like so freaking broad, and it's like further diversifying and niching down as well. So I think as long as you're able to find a skill that you're able to really hammer home and just double down on, you're going to be perfectly fine. Now, one of the clients that I work with, he's always done like back-end coding for banks. And one of the things that he decided to pivot to recently is to go into securities, right? Because online security is becoming an increasingly important field. And one of the things is, career research and planning is so important at this point because this client, he's in his 50s, and everyone's like, oh, you're in your 50s, like, and you're in the IT industry. The young guns are going to blow you out of water because they charge a fraction of your price, and your skill set is increasingly getting outdated, right? You don't know the most recent code and so on. And so he did his career research, and he did his work, and one of the things that we ended up on is that, hey, in securities, it's more about the holistic picture. It's not just like, oh, you got to code this XYZ. And then there's always going to be gaps here and there. Yeah. And only with experience can you actually do a good job in it. And that's what they're hiring for. And so after doing this research, and he decided to make a pivot to enter the securities industry, for IT, and he's doing well in it right now. And so like it's just the whole mindset is like it's never too late. Focus on a skill, really double down on that, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I totally agree. And from my perspective, from the resume perspective, we can always make something make sense to your new direction. Like there's always, and in my opinion, all skills are transferable. And we don't need to like stress out about what's transferable. It's all transferable. Just pick a point you want to go, and then we'll get you there.
Right. Right. And that point's got to be aligned with your target. And that, and hopefully, in your 20s, you would have figured out which skill is really your skill, or like which skill family is your skill, right? Rather than just a specific skill. Like writing is a skill, but you can use that in so many places.
So true. So true. Yeah, I like that skill family. I really like that. I'm gonna keep that one.
Well, it's the whole video game thing, right? Sorry.
Love it. And Hytham came back to us and he's like, we pronounced his name correctly. Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for your question, Hytham. That was a really good one. And keep us posted on what happens with your career. I would really be curious to hear how things pan out for you. Yeah, I think he's going to be snapped up pretty quickly. Yeah. So we've talked about the 20s. Let's talk about the 30s. How is that different in terms of making a career change?
So in the ideal world, right? If you're in your 20s and you've job hopped a bit, you spent some stints here and there, and nothing like, so we're not talking about job hopping like 6 months here and then 8 months here kind of thing, right? We're talking about 1 to 2 years in a place where you're able to actually learn the skill and execute for a while and not really burn bridges and hurt feelings along the way. When you hit your 30s, the typical person, all right, and we're talking about life stage research, is looking into more stable relationships.
Right.
You may be looking into getting a mortgage and family, and kids may be entering the picture. Your hours will then adjust accordingly, right? The amount of hours you want to spend at work versus, at home, taking care of, a young child or so on. And so your needs fundamentally change. Similarly, your needs in the job will change as well. By your 30s, you would probably have a pretty good idea of what you don't like, at least, right?
For sure.
In a good situation, you will know what you like, and you've doubled down on it, and you've really built up that aspect of your career. So when you're in your 30s, it's really finding that space and building that steady base, and slowly move into the mid-levels of management, mid-levels of leadership, because and that's a difficult place, because you need to look up and you got to deal with the people below you, right? And it's really learning those soft skills and realizing that, hey, doing a job is much more than just crunching the numbers or getting those rote activities done that you used to do at the entry level. You start learning those soft skills and you start seeking more stability. And that's the things that you should be looking for, so that you build that network and you build that base, so that once you hit your 40s, right? And we're talking about typical life stage research. I know there's always the Mark Zuckerbergs that, suddenly blow up out of nowhere, right? And so, most of us are not that. And so it's okay to not be Mark, right? But you start building that base. And then so that once you hit your 40s, you're really in the optimal position to, blow up in your career.
Awesome. So you were talking about stability. So stability is obviously kind of a key theme in the 30s age range. Do you find that the mid-management roles do come with do bring more stability, more career stability?
Well, that's the tough thing, right? A lot of the clients and the reason why I work a lot primarily with millennials is that, well, in their some people in their 20s, they job hop and then they don't like it, and even by the time they're done job hopping, they're like, oh, they want to be done job hopping, but they still haven't figured out their next steps yet. There are others in their 30s who they're able to do what they set out to do, but then they start hating it. They start realizing that, hey, it's out of flow. I'm no longer enjoying this. This I've had so much career success, right? And this is very often the case, that they've had a lot of career success, but it's at the expense of their mental health, their physical health, their emotional health. They're not able to be present with their kids. They're usually their kids by that point would be, 6 and below. And the before kindergarten stage, and that's the toughest stage, like physically the most taxing, right? And so when you're in your 30s and that's what you're dealing with, along with the fact that you've been a high you've been a high achiever in your 20s and into your 30s, and you start realizing that you can't really sustain that, it's taking a toll on you. That's when people, the alarm bells start ringing, and I'm like, hey, wait, this isn't working. I need to reorient myself. And the reason for that is usually because in my program, the very first thing that we work out is creating a career statement, right? It's kind of like a vision board. What do you want in your life, right?
I love it.
Write that one paragraph out that summarizes your subconscious thinking, that summarizes your personality, that summarizes your goals, and have that alignment, and stick that somewhere. Share it with your coach, share it with your partner, share it with your best friends, so that they hold you accountable. And it's like, wait a second, you said you wouldn't double down on this investment, and because this investment will cost you more time, and you can't quit your job in a year, and you hate your job already, so why are you doing it, right? These kind of situations, these kind of binds that you naturally put yourself in, because there's a lot of opportunities opening up, and a lot of people would think like, I need to keep pursuing this. I need to keep pursuing this. If you have your career statement and you've done the work, internal work of realizing like, wait a second, this will not make me happy, right? Based on my career statement, this is not going to make me happy. And I've done the work for it. I got to trust me when I'm logical, when I've already done the deep work. Don't trust yourself on the impulse, because you're going to be like, yeah, you know what? Oh, there's a promotion opportunity. You know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. And then you realize like, wait a second, I hate this job. Wait a second, I hate the job description.
Oh, more of what I hate.
Yeah, more of what I hate, right? And a lot of times people end up pursuing that title or pursuing that those things.
Yeah.
And at the end, it's because you don't know where that destination is.
Yeah, for sure. It again, like you're saying, it all goes back to that destination, and before that destination, it really goes back to that self-awareness.
Right. I also want to go back and talk. Make a small distinction. And I understand we're in Canada, and gender roles are they're a hot topic, right?
Sure.
It's a hot topic, but typically for life stage research, when you're 30s and if you are a female and you've had a child, it's very hard to keep up that output that you've done before the child arrived.
Yes.
And when after raising that child for a while, you may not even want to go back to work, because the threshold for family stability and just overall psychological happiness, the threshold is about $80,000, and you're going to be okay, right? In the global West. And so if your partner is able to fulfill that, and it's generally not that big of a deal. That separation from the child is going to be really tough. And then, and that's the female part. Now, if you're talking about the male counterpart, there's other things like, okay, I need to provide that stability. I can't hop around anymore. I got to really, focus on what's important, right? And that mortgage is a backbreaker as well. So there's a lot of these components that we got to keep in mind. Like a career is just one bit, but making it work with your life is so important, right? And so I wanted to bring that in as well.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. It's such an important point that career is a component of your life. It is not your only part of your life. And I can totally relate to what you're saying in terms of like, especially as a female, having just had a baby myself, I cannot. It's impossible, physically impossible for me to keep up the output that I used to, as you're saying. When you have a new life that you're responsible for, it's just, it's impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible. And why do you think there's so many boss mom hashtags out there? It's because there's a real demographic need. A lot of moms want to work from home, have that work-life balance, make a little money on the side, have some satisfaction, call your own shots, work your own hours, while also having kids. Because you deserve to have a career as well, but maybe on different terms. And when you have that career statement, it's no longer like what society's telling you. Oh, you should climb that corporate ladder, break the glass ceiling. It's like, I don't care about the glass ceiling. I care about having more time with my kids, and that's okay. Like to each their own, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I just want to go back to the chat because there's a couple things here circling back to Skill family. Andrew says that's a must keep.
Yeah.
No one's going to forget skill family. That's like ingrained in my brain now. So that's great. And Jude says she was just thanking us for sharing a bit about transferable skills. Shima's saying hello. Jude again saying she loves the career statement idea, which I wanted to say I love too. And I'd be curious to hear from the audience what might go into your career statement. What thoughts are coming to your mind? Just type them in the chat. Would love to hear. Samaya, absolutely agree on that. I've personally used the technique so my family and friends can hold me accountable, going back to the career statement. So that's great. It's a great way to push the extrinsic motivation and incentivizes us to do better. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's some great stuff. Yeah.
And I love the fact that Samaya brought up Samaya brought up the term extrinsic motivation, because what the psychological science shows is that intrinsic motivation is good to motivate you to a certain extent. It's good to motivate you to like do rote behavior, and if your job is to like hammer something, you'll hammer it faster. That's about it, and only for a short time as well. Extrinsic motivations such as money, rewards, or praise from your boss, and another extrinsic motivation is punishment, right? Those would only push you so far. And in this economy nowadays, we are increasingly placing an emphasis on creativity, on soft skills, on people skills. And extrinsic motivation simply isn't very good for that. We need that baseline to survive and pay our bills and everything. But beyond that, you're not going to find happiness in money.
Such a good point. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Derek just popped in and said, this is so on point. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
That is great. So again, tell us what might go in your career statement. I'm really curious. And would love to hear the thoughts from the audience. And so we've talked about 20s, we've talked about 30s. Let's talk about 40s. So kids are born for the most part, mortgage.
Yeah. So there's, when we're looking at life stage research, once again, when you're at your 40s, you are entering your prime in your career. Really, you just entered your prime, right? 20s, you're just a baby. And like, I always have a head scratcher when I see like, I'm 25. Is it too late to change my career? I'm like, what are you talking about? You're just a baby, right?
Yeah.
Like I see that on Reddit all the time. When you're 30s, kids are growing up and life is stabilizing. In your 40s, kids are probably in school by this point. It depends on when you start your family.
Right.
And you would have had enough experience under your belt that at this point you really want to just really manifest yourself in your career, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter at this point. So at this point, by now, you would have a very good idea of, there's something like your dream job, find your dream career, right? I use that as my model, but in fact, that by that point, your dream career doesn't exist. No such thing, right? Sorry, I lie in my LinkedIn. but your dream career doesn't exist because there's always gonna be parts of it that you don't like, right? And so there's always gonna be difficult people. There's always gonna be the next project that's gonna make it difficult for you. But in your 40s, that's where you really get, once you have that goal on what you want to do and really strive towards it, that's what really drives people, right? It's very interesting psychologically. Getting to the top of the hill that you've set your eyes on is not what motivates people. It's not what makes you in flow. That doesn't make you alive. What makes you alive is that journey. So by then, that career statement becomes even more important, right? Because you need to know, where do you want to go in your career, where you want to strive for. And that hustle, that grind is what makes it meaningful, is what makes it satisfying. So in your 40s, I would say, and that's really when the kids are kind of, more hands off, and you can really go do that. And by then, your life is going to be relatively stable, right? You're not going to be switching cities very much, because that'll be uprooting the whole kids, the whole family support system, the whole community. The soccer team, they'll have to leave, the hockey team, whatever, right? Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you'll be dealing with, and at that point, you would have picked your spots. And by then, that's really when your career starts to lift off. Right. And I'm speaking in generalities here as a sociologist, right? You may not be that statistic, but statistically, that's what we see.
Okay, got it, got it. So, when we were talking about the 30s, this is like when people were probably moving into mid-management. So 40s, even though we're realizing the dream career isn't really a thing, are people still moving like further up the management chain? Like what are you seeing?
Yeah, they would.
Yep.
Typically they would.
Yep.
Or they would have hit a ceiling and they want to pivot. And that's the type of people I work with, right? People who hit a ceiling and they're like, I don't like what I do, or the next step is not good and I want to move. Sorry, there's one more thing I forgot to bring
Okay,
up.
yeah.
Probably the most important point, and it's the midlife crisis. Right?
Not that.
And I want to like talk about the midlife crisis, because the midlife crisis is actually not a crisis. The midlife crisis is what we call a series of midlife triggers.
Okay.
Midlife triggers is things that will make you think. Like when you are in your 40s, your parents are old enough that you need to take care of them. You start seeing their health fall apart and you're like, I need to take care of my parents. I need to be here. There's another component. It's like, my kids are dealing with social problems now. It's not just, here's the bottle. It's actually like, oh, my kid's getting bullied. Oh, my kid's in a relationship. How am I dealing with this? All right. Oh, wait, I'm actually getting old. From the perspective of, since you have kids bringing other kids in your house, right? You start realizing like, I really need to be responsible. You may not be satisfied in your personal career. You may not be satisfied in your finances. You see other friends who attended the same high school as you much further along. You may not be satisfied sexually, right? Because at that point, your health, if you have not been keeping up with your health in your 20s and 30s, it's going to be tough, physically and sexually as well. So there are a number of things that all come into play in your 40s. And we call all these individually midlife triggers. But as a result of them all coinciding at the same time, it becomes a midlife crisis. And that's where you go back to the drawing board and a lot of people go reevaluate their lives. Right. And that should have been my first answer. I don't know why it escaped me the first time.
Oh, that's okay.
I mean, probably because I'm getting there and I'm like, oh crap, I don't want to talk about it.
Me too. I am too. Oh no, I'm scared. So that's a really good point. And Don mentioned that he likes midlife triggers much better.
Yeah.
I would say that's far more palatable than crisis, but I guess a culmination of triggers could become a crisis. So what about like, I feel like if I were to think about my life, I feel like I had a midlife crisis early. Is that normal to have? I feel like I had a midlife crisis in my early 30s, which became my career change essentially. Right. So
can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I left corporate to start my career, my second career. No, actually my ninth. I counted after listening to the stat that you had 12 to 15 career changes. I counted, I had 9.
Right.
But
you're getting up there, right?
Oh yeah, get it totally. Yeah. So I feel like I had a bit of a midlife crisis, or I should say multiple triggers at that age. And I was in my early 30s. So is that something that you see?
Yeah, that's totally normal. Everyone's at a different point. I mean, like, so for example, in your 40s, a common trigger would be, divorce. Right? When you're in your 20s and 30s, the kids are growing up and you don't want to rock the family, but now the kids are a little older and they seem to understand things a little more. And perhaps, you have the 10-year crisis and then, the 7-year crisis and there's a 10-year crisis. I don't know. There's other people like slap different names upon these relationships, but perhaps that relationship has run its course, right? And at that point, that may be a case. Now, it may happen earlier in your late 20s. It may happen earlier, like in your 30s, right? Yeah. So everyone's different. And that's why when we talk about midlife crisis, it's like, it's not always a crisis. Some people have figured it out and it all happened in their 30s. And so that's why we use midlife triggers, because for example, if a parent of yours suddenly, became really ill and, knock on wood, they left, right? That may not happen in your 40s. That may have happened in your 20s, right? So that's why everyone's different. But if we're talking about, the chances of them all coinciding at the same time, 40s is the time.
40s is the time. Okay. Got it.
Typically, we're all speaking statistics here.
Yeah, got it. Statistics. Okay. So thanks for helping me validate my triggers, my grouping of triggers. So we have a question from Romaldo. Hi, Dr. Tam. What are your thoughts about recruiters missing out on transferable skills when a candidate is considering a career change? How common is this? Ooh.
Kamara, why don't you take this one? I think this is more up your alley.
Yeah, but I really am curious on your thoughts. I mean, I'm going to say real quickly, I think that from a purely strategic and tactical point of view, they're not picking up on it because we're not telling them clearly enough. Yeah. So I think that's where it is. I mean, we control what we can control. We can't control their perception, but we can control what we write. So I think I would take a look more closely at what I'm writing in my resume. What are your thoughts, Jon?
I generally, I totally agree, actually. The thing is, once you've set that target for your job application, for your career path, what happens then is you should do research, such as informational interviews. And if any career coaches tells you on LinkedIn to, sign up with them, and, they'll teach you how to find, enter a job, it's usually through informational interviews. So I'll just tell you that right now. There's a playlist on my YouTube channel for that. And I just saved you $2,000, right? But
thank you.
But pretty much you do your due diligence in doing informational interviews, in researching for a job or similar jobs at different targets, right? Different potential similar job profiles. And then you know how to tailor your marketing document, which is the resume, to the application. And if you are able to, reach out and speak to the hiring manager or the recruiter so that they kind of know who you are and that you've put the application in, and you've gone that extra mile to reach out to them, then it's good, right? Because at the end of the day, when the recruiter or the hiring manager is going through that pile of resumes, right? The ones that actually narrow down and they put into 3 piles of yes, maybe, and no, and you don't want to be in the maybe pile, right? Once they're going to down that stage, they're in auto full out bias mode. They're trying to go through as many resumes as possible. And if your resume doesn't signal the right key skills, the right keywords that they're looking for, you're not going to get picked. You'll end up in the other 2 piles. And that's why you need experts like Kamara to take care of these things for you, to look out, make sure, hey, is your resume aligned to the target job, right? And that's super important. So not only is it about finding that career path, but you also know how to market yourself properly.
Absolutely. It's exactly that. It's about the marketing. Thank you for your insights, Jon. Thank you, Romaldo, for your question. That was an excellent one. And Anna agrees. She thanks you for that question as well. She's currently going through something similar. So I hope Jon's and my answers were helpful for you. Now let's talk about 50s, because this came up on Twitter, and Dolores is here. Dolores is the person who asked about the 50s, and I'm sorry I didn't include that in the actual thumbnail because I didn't realize that you work with a lot of folks that are in their 50s as well. And so Andrew, actually, speaking of 50s, he says he's 50 and was retrenched due to COVID, probably triggered 5 years ago. Learning is a continuous process. Absolutely, Andrew. Yeah. So let's talk about a bit about 50s. And Dolores just popped in with a question on 50s too. So what are your thoughts on changing careers in your 50s?
I think changing your careers in your 50s is you have to be very strategic about it. You have to be much more careful. And this is just the general trend. The older you get, your margin of error and the runway you have typically, decreases, right? Not the runway, the risk tolerance. You may have a huge runway.
Okay.
The risk tolerance decreases, right?
Yep.
And your runway is a part of it. Your runway is how much money you've saved up. So when I work with my clients in their 50s, one of the things that, we talk about, and we have a very honest conversation about this, is that, it's about riding the rest of the career out in a secure manner, It's not about, it's not saying that it's the end of the road or anything, but at this point, you're nearing the twilight of your career, typically speaking, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you need to plan it out carefully. You need to plan it out in find roles that are not going to be, that are more stable in more traditional sectors. I would generally recommend that, like more stable, more traditional sectors, using traditional skills that you've, and that really capitalizes on the human aspect, the people skills aspect of it, because that's generally the advantage that you'll have on over other people, or experience, right? And there are jobs out there that look for that, but you just really have to do your due diligence and the proper research to find these positions. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll just say it as it is. Like, why you and not a young gun, right? Who would stick around, right? Now, mind you, being in your 50s, you also have a number of advantages. It's like, well, at this point, you are also seeking stability, and they may also want you over a young gun because you are perceived as more stable and more reliable, right? So these are things that you need to play up. But I think in the 50s, careful strategic planning for your career is critical, right? Like that the example of the IT professional I mentioned earlier. Don't compete with the young guns. You cannot outprice them, and you cannot outskill them, right? The main thing that you have in your favor is experience and stability and insight, and you should really capitalize on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely from a soft skills perspective, I would say a 50-year-old, like if we're talking statistically and generally speaking, 50-year-old is stronger in soft skills than a 20-year-old typically.
Right.
And so I think that's a huge competitive advantage, especially when you are stepping into leadership roles or growing further into leadership. And actually that goes to Dolores's question, which is she's a little curious about why there might be the assumption that someone in their 50s wants to be in leadership. And yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, and that's a difficult thing, right? I think ageism is a real thing. Ageism is a real problem in society in terms of job selection and job search. And I don't want to say 50 is old, because 50 really isn't that old. But the reality is, if you are, just say if you are if you're 30 something and you're managing people who are in their 50s or 60s, and I've been in that position before. I was the department head in my school. And my oldest colleague was 62 or 63. Right. How am I supposed to manage? How much? Like, this person has been teaching for 40 something years, and I've been teaching for less than 5 years. I'm their department head. How am I supposed to deal with that? Well, it's actually quite a struggle. It's not easy. They can be nice to you, and that's what you feel like. It's kind of like, right. And so I don't want to say, like, at this point, everyone's life has run a certain course, and everyone's developed in a different way. So generalities is very difficult to speak to. But I think when you're in your 50s, being in a management role is kind of, middle management or even like lower management is generally okay. If you are doing, the entry level positions or jobs, if it's what you're looking for, like if all you want to do is have a job, 9 to 5, clock it, and then go home, and you don't want to take work home with you, all the power to you. Just understand that the risk of that is higher, because I mean, when it comes to layoffs, chances of you being in line is higher than someone who's relatively younger. And I think that's just a reality. And this is why it's a more difficult conversation for people in their 50s. What do you think, Kamara?
For sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot more complexity. As to your point, ageism is very much a real thing. And to your point about layoffs, like who's going to be in the front row for that, basically. If you're more expensive, you're probably going to be targeted first for a layoff. So you're right. The stability factor, it's not necessarily there if you're a little more expensive and not in a leadership role. Although layoffs, we often do see layoffs like first rounds or early rounds occurring to people who are in the leadership roles because they are expensive. So, there's like you said, it's hard to speak in generalities, but yeah, it's from what I see for the clients I work with, they want to be in leadership roles, or even getting deeper into board roles when they're reaching their 50s. Dolores had a follow-up question or follow-up comment. She's preferred to learn new skills and rather than manage people, which I totally get.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, and then Andrew said,
I think I want to say one more thing though.
Yeah.
Regarding Dolores's point is that it depends on the corporate structure you're in. Like it really depends.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when you are in a big corporate environment, and if the next step available to you is, manage, like your only option may be to manage people. They may not have specialist roles, right? Companies like Microsoft and IBM have been pretty smart. They created specialist roles so that people who love to code and love to, design stuff, they don't have to manage people. They become the company experts, in-house researchers. That's a possibility for some companies, but other companies, the next step up is always managing more people. Right.
Yeah.
And that's why it depends, your career statement matters. Sometimes you don't want to work for a big corporate. Maybe you want to work for a small company, right? Small company, you have your hands in many different pots. And there you get a lot more experience. You become more an integral member of the team. There's a stronger sense of belonging, a stronger sense of community, right? And that's why you need to understand, there's so many layers to this. And I would say, if you're able to find yourself in a small company where you're able to wear multiple hats, become an integral member of it, I think, that may be something more desirable than something like climbing the corporate ladder.
Yeah. I mean, again, it all goes back to the self-awareness that we've been talking about and what you want. Yeah, love it. And Andrew just mentioned, to your point earlier, you're so correct. Stable is the new 50s. I like that. Right.
But you might also have a late midlife, crisis or multiple midlife triggers, right?
Of triggers, yeah.
So there's also that. So there's so many layers to this once you get to that age.
For sure, absolutely. And just have a question here from Anna. In order to transition into a new career, do you have to take an entry-level job? Okay. I bet you have a lot of thoughts on that.
I do. It depends. It really depends. But I would say it depends on the type of pivot you want to do. So when you're doing a pivot, there's literally 5 options, right? And for any pivot, the first pivot we've discussed already, changing yourself to the job or changing the job to you, right? If you're able to adjust it, then that's fine. But that's changing the job. Now, if you're talking about a career switch, there's generally 3 types of switches, right? The first type of switch is what we call a functional switch. You keep the industry, you stay in the same industry, you stay in the same career path, you stay same company, but you change your function. The other switch is what we call an industry switch, right? So you switch to a different industry, switch to a different company size, switch to a different geography, switch to a different area, and that may do it for you. That may be enough to satisfy you. So for example, if you used to do HR at Apple, you decide to do HR for Chick-fil-A or whatever, right? Love Chick-fil-A. Anyways, you don't get that up here in Canada. And then the last switch is what we call a double switch, right? And a double switch is the toughest and hardest to make, and sometimes that may entail you to take an entry-level position. But at the same time, though, your soft skills, if you focus on your soft skills, would be much further along. So even if you take it at the early level, you may climb it very quickly, or you may be able to slot yourself right into a middle management role right away, because what matters at that point is the soft skills and project management skills, and just managing people, rather than knowing really the nitty gritty of the job. So it really depends on the specific job you're talking about. Now, for a double switch, the most ideal recommendation I would give people, because a double switch is tough, is to do what we call a stepping stone switch. Change function, then industry, or change industry, then function, right? And that's basically the recommendation I would give people who are transitioning to a new career. What do you think, Kamara?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And my caution would be, if you are trying to make a switch, just be certain that you might need to take an entry-level job before you apply to it, because making that switch to something more junior is just as hard, if not harder, than trying to go for something in the next level up, from what I've seen. It's a tough sell, selling you less than what you're currently at in terms of your career level. So I don't know if you've seen that in your work, Jon.
Well, I think it also matters, like that's where you come in. I think a lot of times it depends how you market yourself. You may have the skills for it, right? Either in a volunteer capacity or either in a freelance capacity, or maybe in consulting, right? There are different ways for you to build those hard skills. And so if it's close enough in that family and in that skill family, then it's possible they may be willing to take a gamble for you. Companies hire for three reasons: the what, the how, and the why, right? In varying orders. The what is what skills you have, what skills you bring to the table. The how is how you fit with the team, and the why is what motivates you, right? And sometimes, especially for small companies, small businesses, they may prefer the how you fit with everyone, over the what, right? They may be more patient with you learning on the job. Now, if you're talking about big corporations, they probably care more about the what than the how, right? What first, like what, how, and then why. So it depends. It really depends. I'd be careful of I'd steer away from blanket statements in general. I'll always love to hedge myself, but I think it depends.
Yeah, it definitely depends. I would much rather see someone gaining experience without having to or attempting to go junior to what they are. Like you said, through volunteering, through freelancing, that is much more ideal from my perspective, because and also I don't want to see people selling themselves short either. I don't want people by default targeting junior roles because they think that's the only way to get to make that pivot. And you've already identified some really great ways to go about it.
Right. Kamara, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
How about going back to school?
How about going back to school? What are my thoughts on that?
Yeah. Like a lot of people are like, I want to pivot my career. Does going back to school help? I kind of know the answer for this, but I'm really doing this for the audience.
Thanks. I mean, I think it depends. So I think it depends really where you want to go. I like not necessarily going back to school full time, but taking professional development, self-directed courses, some side hustles, some kind of self-directed projects. That's my ideal. What are your thoughts?
I agree, and I generally, when people tell me like I want to change careers, should I go back to school? The first thing I say is like, well, have you done the research, right? Is going back to school a credential you need? Like, is it a professionally regulated industry? So if you want to go to be a teacher, and you want to teach at the public school, well, you need a teaching license, right? If you want to be a nurse, you need a nursing license. But if if you're going to switch careers, and you're going to enter management, and it's real, and you're like, oh, should I go get an MBA for that? And it's like, right. That's when you're like, I don't know. There's cheaper ways to do it.
Yeah, I like that. There's cheaper ways to do it.
Cheaper and more time efficient ways to do it, to build that experience, because you need relevant experience as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I've seen a lot of my clients with no degrees have a great amount of success. I'm not discounting degrees, but a lot of people are worried, like, I'm 20 years into my career and I don't have a degree, and they're worried even though they have that 20 years behind them. I don't worry so much about that. Yeah. Because in my opinion, experience trumps education in almost all situations, except as you said, if it's a regulated kind of profession where you need a license. Okay, so we're at time, and wow, time has flown. Like, this has been a great conversation. Samaya has just said, thank you, Kamara and Dr. Tam, excellent session. So glad you got value out of it, Samaya. Thank you for coming and your great points and questions. Anna says thank you. Anna's also asking a question about salary requirements. And Anna, there's a resource I'm going to point you towards about salary requirements. Just one final question for us to answer, Jon. Doesn't an MBA increase credibility in job opportunities?
MBAs, well, it depends, right?
In the management example.
In the management example. MBA makes you more qualified for it. In terms of a qualification, you would stand out. But not in all situations, because sometimes they care more about whether you can actually do the job or not. The title, like remember, the trend now is focus on the skills rather than titles. If you have the skills to do it, you have banging references, you have an awesome portfolio, you're able to communicate it well through Kamara services with resume writing, you're able to highlight those numbers, then I don't see why you can't beat a fresh grad out of an MBA, like with an MBA. I know some people who, they do school and then they go straight to an MBA and they come out and it's like, you're just a kid, to be honest, right? You're just a kid.
Yeah.
And I know some people who, and one of my friends at Oxford, when I studied there, he got his MBA completely paid for, full ride, because he got promoted to a position in a Japanese corporation, and that corporation decided to send him to Oxford Said Business School. That's where I met him.
Wow.
And that's where he got trained and he got his free MBA.
Free MBA at Oxford.
Yeah, just it's no biggie, right? Free MBA from Oxford, right? These are the opportunities we're talking about. So why pay out of pocket? Right. And so it depends. It depends. If you want to stand out and you don't think you can beat other people and you need that extra title, then yeah, sure. But like Kamara and I know very well, skills matter a lot more than titles.
100%. So with that, I just want to check in with you, Jon. Where are the best places for people to reach you? Obviously, your YouTube channel, which I have linked to in all descriptions of this session. Where else can people follow you? People
can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter. Actually, I don't use Instagram. I have an account, but I'm hardly there. Okay. But the best place to follow me really is LinkedIn. So, yeah. So I'll be send a connection request. I'll be glad to connect.
Fantastic. So make sure you do connect with Jon. And thank you so much for your time tonight, Jon. I really appreciate it. Everybody really loved our chat tonight. Really insightful from Don. Dolores says, great discussion. Andrew says, great session. And Najwa says, thank you. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kamara.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll have you back. I'm sure we'll have some more career-changing topics to chat about. So thanks. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Dr. Tam. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next Thursday. Take care.
Take care.